Hello, I wanted to talk today about setting up your Akai EWI USB for building your own synthesizer in Puredata. The first thing you need to do is actually set up the EWI USB to talk to Puredata. Software, fortunately, does not let open broadcast software record my microphone, so I'm just showing you screenshots here. When I open the official software, it can be found on their website. I'll put a link to it. Go to the Tools EWI configuration. Here, I've got the pitch bend gain turned all the way down just because I hate when my thumb accidentally triggers the pitch bend. If you want to leave that on, you can. Other than that, everything else here is set up as default. This is important. The byte CC2, you have to assign it to something. By default, this is not assigned. I assign it to slider 16 because it's the first thing that's not assigned to anything else. That made sense to me, but you can assign it to whatever you want. This page, the performance controls, I have this set up all as default. If you want to change the MIDI channel, transpose it, or change the fingering system, here's where you would do it. I find the EWI standard fingering system works just fine for me. I'm a flute player, and I also play the saxophone, and so it works okay. Transposing is something we can actually do in Puredata, and I like to have a dynamic transposing built into my synthesizer, so I don't have to worry about it. So, with that being set up to where we can talk to Puredata, let's open a new patch. First thing, we want to set up the audio settings. Right now, I've got a delay of 80 milliseconds. I find that on Linux, I can get that down to about 25, okay? On Windows, probably 35-ish before I start seeing lag. I'm going to leave it at 80 for now, just to make sure it works. If you start getting lag, if your device starts disconnecting, set that number a little bit higher. I've heard of people needing to set it in the 180s just to get it to work. MIDI settings, select your EWI USB. If you leave your Akai software open, you cannot use the EWI to communicate to both at the same time. So you need to close out the Akai software, shut Puredata down entirely, and then reopen it. Let's go to the MIDI testing menu to see what we're looking at here. That is here. Okay, you can see the, oh goodness gracious, what am I looking at? Here's the audio input. Here's me talking into the microphone. Control N, you notice that the vibrato sensor, I set to 16, is going crazy right now. The air sensor is not doing a whole lot. If I start playing notes on this thing, you'll see them show up right here. Strip note, my understanding is it takes note on messages to the left and note off messages to the right. It could be slightly incorrect. But with using your EWI, you do need to use strip note, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So, let's go note in. I'm going to zoom in so you can see what's going on. Okay, so when you receive MIDI messages, you usually get a note value and a velocity value. So you saw that I played 62, a D, at value 26, I think it was, and then when I stopped blowing in it, it came back to 0. Now, the velocity value tells the machine if the note turned on or off. It's not really that useful because it doesn't get the change over time that you're looking for with a wind instrument. So we just don't use it. I don't. If you want to, you can. You can use it to trigger some things. You can use it to trigger filters to make it where the beginning of the note has a different sound than the rest of the note. That would be fine. I tend to just use strip note and strip it out entirely. So to use strip note, you do have to connect both of these inlets to it. I'll slide that down so you can see it. Okay, so again, we're only worried about this value here on the left. Now, if you talked about transposing, if you want to transpose, you could have some other value, maybe a MIDI controller somewhere else, setting the transpose value here. If you want to go up or down by a couple octaves, you could do that as well. I like to handle all my transposing in this software as opposed to setting it in the software preferences, because it's just a whole lot easier, a lot more dynamic. Once you've got your MIDI note, when I get it to a frequency, you can put it through an oscillator. And send it on out. This is an object in my repository. I will link my repository below so you can see it and find it. You notice I didn't use the velocity for anything. About to. If you've ever built a synthesizer, this is about to look very familiar. We're using control in 2, though, which is the breath sensor. Again, that can be configured to anything, but channel 2, I think, is default for every wind instrument out there. We're going to divide that by 128, get a value between 0 and just under 1. Because anything, all your MIDI values by default are going to be from 0 to 127. We're going to scale that. So wrong thing. I do find it hard to talk and type at the same time. There we go. So all this does is it smooths out the input so that over a 10 millisecond window, it draws a line from whatever value was last to the new value over 10 milliseconds. It smooths out the signal so that you don't get any discontinuities in the signal, and you get smooth changes. The other way to do that would be to just run it under a, I think, high-pass filter of whatever delay time you want. Here it'd be a whole second. You don't want that. And would give you 10 milliseconds, I guess? I don't know. Some people do it that way. I just prefer to use straight lines. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you think sounds best. Now I can turn the volume all the way up and not have to worry about it. A lot of times when you're building a synthesizer, people do EDSR envelopes where you have an attack, decay, sustain, release. With a EWI, you can do that all with your air. So you don't have to worry about building the envelope from scratch. Because whatever you perform on it is what it does using this method here. And then this, here, I'm going to put sliders on these so we can see them. Control in 16 is what I set to the sensor, the vibrato sensor. You can see it looks a little erratic right now. I probably need to take my machine apart and clean it. It does go down. And then when you bite on it, I'm squeezing it with my fingers right now. You can see it changes. Values from 0 to 127. We're going to scale, let me think. I'm trying to think about how I want to affect the sound with this. I should have planned this ahead, and I didn't. Okay, we are going to. This is a very cheap, easy way to mix square wave. As you can see, it gets some artifact in there. That works. The thing we can do is a low pass filter in here and take this value. Low pass filter, by the way, does not take a audio rate argument for the frequency. It takes a control rate argument or a K rate argument. Oh, I don't need to do that. Times 5,000. So I need to go straight from here to there. This is going to start looking like a mess in a second, but it's okay. And it froze on me. I'm going to show you what to do when it does that. That's audio settings are back up. Notice, so the machine's still performing something even though I'm not playing it, I'm talking to you. Go to the MIDI settings and just set it again. and putting new input for the breath sensor, turns it back off. Sometimes that happens when you're running extra software like OBS. What you can do you can receive any messages that are being sent to PD. You want to route out the pings because it gets a ping every cycle, which is really annoying to sift through in the console. And then you just print everything else. So going over to the Puredata console, I'm going to hit Shift. See, this printing anything sent to PD. And all the key messages are in there too. So what we can do is go to the MIDI settings. Okay. See what was just sent. It's right here. Oh, great. Invalid device ID. That's annoying. Anyway, we can copy all this. Send it to PD. Now, anytime the device freezes on us, just set it that way instead of going through the MIDI dialog all over again. What I was going to do here was set an offset on this. So divide that by 56, I think should do it. Hopefully I've done this right. So now I can use the vibrato sensor to actually affect the tone of the instrument. I forgot to smooth it out, so I will do that. Okay. And I find that vibrato sensor makes for a great area for having expressive tone on this instrument. Some really quick and easy things you can do to make your instrument sound a little more professional is to put a little bit of reverb on it. Most instruments have some reverb on them. If you listen to them, I don't know. I think it just makes it sound better. And add a little bit of detuning. So if we zoom out, it's kind of hard to see everything when I zoomed out. I just want to move everything around to where it goes. So this goes here. What I'd like to do is copy all of this. I would never actually recommend building an instrument this way without any sends and receives. Any duplicate lines you need to be drawing with sends and receives, it's so much easier. It's going to sound bad. This is going to sound less bad. Okay. And all I'm doing is I'm duplicating it, but at a slightly different frequency. Make sure I get all of these sent back where they're supposed to go. This goes to here. This line goes going where it needs to. This one to the low pass filter. And then here, I'm going to need to divide this by 2 because now I have 2 instances of this going. Or that's the wrong thing. Sorry. I've heard that multiplying is computationally easier than dividing. I have no idea if that's true or not. Okay. So just adding that little extra layer of flanginess to it makes it sound a little different. There's other things you can do. You use your own imagination. Do whatever you'd like. There's much, much, much better ways to build square waves that don't have all that sort of horrible low frequency content in the high range. I just did this all for demonstration. I've spent way too long experimenting and figuring out how to get square waves up high to sound good. And I'd like to say I feel like I've been successful at it. But hopefully this gets you started with building your own synthesizers for your EWI.